Hey guys, and welcome to Should You Buy It, where all we do is talk a little bit about the game and tell you whether or not we think it's worth the cost.
And face the fearsome truth of the darkest dungeon.
In this episode, we'll be playing Darkest Dungeon 2, the turn-based RPG roguelike game where you'll battle through an apocalyptic world in an attempt to restore the light amidst the darkness. The first question that we always cover in these videos is what stage of development is the game in? And in this case, in Darkest Dungeon 2, it is currently in full release and available on PC for $40. Now, if you guys want to save money on games, you should check out Humble Bundle in the description below. Humble Bundle will not only help to give you a discount on games sometimes, but will also help charity and support this channel. Everything you purchase on Humble Bundle will go towards helping a charity, helping our channel, and giving you some kind of a discount if there's a discount running on that game, which they have tons of discounts that Steam does not all the time. And again, if you want to save money, just check out Humble Bundle down below by clicking the link. So what exactly is the game? Well, Darkest Dungeon 2 is a very challenging game, so let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. This isn't a game that you're expected to finish quickly or beat even in your first 5 or 20 attempts for that matter. Now, Darkest Dungeon 2 has a lot of very important elements to talk about, so let's just go ahead and jump right in and start by talking about the combat. The combat is very similar to its predecessor, with many abilities even returning for the sequel, as well as some changes to those abilities in order to make it fit the balance for the current game. Combat is of course going to be turn-based, and each character within that combat is going to have their own turn priority based on the amount of speed they have, as well as a small amount of RNG. So in other words, if you have a character that has say 10 speed and everybody else has 7 speed that's in that combat, including the enemies, you are most likely going to go first, if not guaranteed to go first, as long as you don't roll super bad on RNG. And even if you did roll bad, in most cases, if you have a high speed, you'll still be going second or third. Once you're on a character's turn, you'll then be able to use consumable combat items like bandages for an example as a free action, and then you'll have the choice of either moving, passing, or using a skill. Moving is pretty straightforward, as you'll just swap places with other members of your party by simply moving forward or moving backwards, and passing is just going to be skipping your turn at the cost of increasing your stress. Using abilities, however, can have drastically different effects depending on the ability that you're using. Some abilities may heal your team, damage enemies, debuff your enemies, apply buffs to your team, and others may even reduce the stress of your party. Which leads me into talking about one of the most important things to mention here, and that is that stress is a very unique and very important mechanic to the game. You see, each player character will have 10 points of stress available. If that stress is maxed out, the character's resolve will then be tested by an RNG system. If successful, that character will then heal to full and improve their relationship with other party members. If you fail though, you'll have a meltdown and drop your HP to about 10% and reduce that character's relationship with other members of their party. The idea here is that this kind of acts as a second health bar that must be managed since it has such a massive impact on your run. Now you may be asking, what are these relationships you're talking about? Well, relationships are a new mechanic added to the franchise as of Darkest Dungeon 2. Essentially, this is raised at ends in exchange for using special items or by selecting options at specific events that your party will encounter and the rest of the party members enjoy you choosing. This may be helping some travelers on the side of the road or simply ditching them to save your own skin, depending on what your party members want. Now, the reason these relationships are so important is primarily because it allows you to have bonus effects at the start of each map that you play on, or what we'll call a biome. These bonus effects will change one ability for 2 characters with either a good or negative relationship. If the 2 party members have a negative relationship, then one ability for each of them will cause a negative effect to the opposite party member, and if they had a good relationship, it would cause a good effect to the opposite party members, such as healing them, removing debuffs, or reducing stress. Now, as far as completing a run goes, you'll simply need to travel from the start of the game by stagecoach in order to reach the mountain through a variety of different paths. To get to that mountain, you'll be traveling through several different biomes as well, each with their own unique enemies, events, and bosses that you'll have to deal with. Upon completing each one of those biomes, you'll then be rewarded with a rest at an inn. At this inn, you'll be able to regenerate some health, reduce your stress levels, and upgrade your stagecoach, all for the right price. I mean, there may be flesh-eating zombies right outside, but that innkeeper's gotta make that money, am I right? Eventually though, you will reach the mountain and have to take on the final boss, assuming you've made it there alive. If successful, you'll get to progress the story and start the game over again, except this time with a different act for you to complete and different modifiers, as well as a new final boss. Before you begin any journey though, you'll want to make sure to stop by and spend those candles that you got from your previous journey. Candles are a currency that you'll be able to spend to unlock about 90% of the game's progression system. Just about everything you could imagine, such as heroes, items, passive buffs, stagecoach upgrades, skins, and even subclasses, are all unlocked via candles. There is, however, one other way to unlock things, and that's through the hero shrines that you'll encounter on your journey. These will have the player choose one character in their party to unlock a new ability and a portion of their backstory. Sometimes the game will even have you play through that backstory, and if you fail, you'll just have to give it another try since you won't get the ability this time around. Alrighty, now let's move over to the pros and cons section of the video. First up for the pros is the unique graphic art style and setting. There are not many roguelike games that have gritty, grimy atmospheres that portray something akin to Dark Souls like Darkest Dungeon itself does. Overall, I think the graphical art style fits the setting absolutely perfectly, and I really just couldn't ask for more. Next is a bit of a controversial one, but personally I really enjoyed the progression system. Some people have stated that they don't like that you have to unlock more power through dozens and dozens of runs, but in a roguelike, it feels like it's meant to be expected, and here they delivered pretty darn well with tons of options and tons of things for you to unlock in order to keep you interested in the long run. After that is that the game had a great tutorial system where it explained exactly what the player needed to know as it was relevant to the player. So many games nowadays just drop all this information on you right when you start or have a tutorial mission for you to play through and then don't help you out anymore throughout your entire time. Thankfully, Darkest Dungeon 2 doesn't do that and just gives you the right amount of information at the right time, and it will probably take you a few playthroughs to learn all the basics that you'll need to know about the game. And finally is that the game feels like it was challenging enough to feel really fun and rewarding when you accomplish something, but not so difficult that it felt like I was banging my head against a wall for 20 hours. Granted, this game is very challenging, and if you're not familiar with turn-based roguelikes, you might bang your head against a wall for 20 hours, but if you are even remotely familiar with the genre, then this is going to probably be the perfect amount of difficulty for you. In other words, it feels super rewarding whenever you do something challenging in the game, as your hand was not held throughout the entire process and you are forced to learn through trial and error. Alrighty, now let's move over to the cons section of the video. First up for the cons is just the fact that there is no way to speed up the animations and the storytelling. Granted, the narrator sounds amazing, so no complaints there. It's just that by the time you're at like hour 20 or 30 in the game starts to get a bit repetitive with its animations, such as attack animations or having to wait for the narrator to tell you something, or little things like that. Again, it's not a big deal, but it would be nice to have like a 2x speed option for players after they maybe beat the second act. Again, this isn't a thing right now, but I wouldn't be shocked if maybe they added this, as it seems to be pretty widely requested by the player base. And the only other con I have for you guys today is just that the enemy types start to get stale after a while. Granted, there are elite variations of most of the enemies, and depending on which act you're doing, they can get some different modifiers, but it's just not enough for me though. By the time I hit hour 20, I was starting to feel like I was just fighting the same things over and over and over again, which granted, it's a roguelike and that's to be expected, but it still felt a bit stale, and I would like to see maybe a couple of new mobs start to spawn between acts outside of just the final boss. Alrighty, so now it's time for the rating for the game, and when we rate games, we want to get 1 hour of enjoyment out of every $1 that the game costs. So for this game in particular, in Darkest Dungeon 2, we would want to get roughly 40 hours of enjoyment out of the $40 cost of the game. And after putting over 24 played hours into this game, we give it 8 out of 10 potatoes. Darkest Dungeon 2 lives up to the genre-defining game that its predecessor was. This is because many things in it stand out, such as its graphical art style, the combat, and the progression systems that have been implemented. But to me, the best executed portion of the entire game is the difficulty. There are only a few turn-based roguelike games out there right now that make the game feel hard enough to where you have to try over and over again in order to progress and learn from your mistakes, but don't make you feel like you're wasting your time every time you die and start the game over again. And therefore, we feel that Darkest Dungeon 2 is definitely worth the cost. Before you guys go, I do want to give you a quick thank you for watching the video. Like it if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, and share if you've got some friends that might be interested. Either way, I want to give a big shout out to our Platinum Above channel members, which currently include Caustic FPV, Jonathan S, Gerald89, AZ Blackbird, and Jim Phillips. Thank you all so much for watching once again. I'm Game Advisor, and I'll see you in the next one.